Well, hello there. Top of the morning to you all. I'm here in Norfolk, Nebraska, home of the COVID. It's sometimes all you can do is laugh, right? I have a lot going on today, so what I'm going to be doing is combine these files because I need to clear up a ton of information and add a ton of information about this deal going on with Aquino and all of the mind-altering stuff. Turns out after they destroyed the records for MK7, the project picked up full speed ahead with Aquino and the satanic people at the head. And after the last show, as far as all the women getting raped, their historians had blamed Russia for a very long time. Russia was blamed for raping women, not the Allied forces. That only came clear in the 90s, okay? So for a very long time in our history, the Russians got blamed for raping all of those women. Don't forget also, Barbara Bush is likely Crowley. Crowley, all this black magic stuff, right? Just pull up a picture, Barbara Bush and Crowley. You will find the side-by-side comparison. I also have it over on my website under the elite people. Yeah, Barbara Bush likely played the role of Crowley. The Bushes are into all this stuff. And as a reminder, things to watch for, here's how you start to move troops into place. They're putting an increase of border, National Guard is being increased at the border of Mexico. Newsom just ordered them there to increase the numbers. Well, he claims it's to stop fentanyl. No, this is how you start to move troops around, right? You start to put them into position. So you claim that they're going to stop fentanyl. Hey, we got all the fentanyl we need within this country thanks to the CIA. Good morning, Virginia. How you guys doing over there today? I don't have anything ugly to say about you today, just the truth. So buckle up, buckwheats. We're going to be talking CIA today. Da, 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 da. And also, I have a clip over there. As of today, you can always tell who their agents are, right? Their agents are all seeming to get weak-looking left eyes. The left eye path where they do their initiations and get whacked in the left side of the head. Well, Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald can't help but notice they both have whacked out left eyes now, right? Does that happen when you get 1 million subscribers? You get into compliance, do a few little rituals? I don't know, but Jimmy Dore is now pushing, pushing. And if you look at the clip, just check out his eye. It's not my imagination. His eye, his left eye is wonky. There's a reason, right? So why is he pushing it? Well, he's pushing the fact that claiming that Israel was the one who did all of the terror over there. It was Israel behind it all. And you notice they leave out the words the United States. I'm showing you this today because this is exactly how the CIA misdirection works, right? Now they want to get people focused on Israel as a culprit and leave the United States out of the picture. Exactly how it works. I also took a deeper look into Mr. Aquino. He is also known as the 13th Baron of Rothschild, Clan of Campbell in Scotland. Remember that Scottish flag showed up? The Civil War flag came from Scottish origins. So yeah, Scotland is where he's from. Ian Campbell, a Highland Scottish clan, historically one of the largest and most powerful of the Highland clans. The Clan Campbell lands are in Argyll, and within their lands lies Ben Cruachan. So the chief of the clan became Earl of Argyll, that's Argyll, and later Duke of Argyll. So I pulled up a lot of whatever I found. And here's how you look for more information. I took those words that, let me back up here a second. I just took those words, the clan of the 13th Baron of Rothschild. What I did was I just copy and pasted that, and I'll have it below for you also, so you can copy and paste those exact same words. Then you add the name Aquino to it. And then I came up with a lot of information that I'll be sharing down below because people have done some initial genealogy stuff on him. And I also have Excuse me. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of information out there about Aquino and this stuff. Also, I have some other clips just for you to take a look at if you're interested in more of the history of some of this stuff going on. There have been a lot of cases, like German nuns were allegedly renting orphan boys to sexual predators. I've been looking for more information about the boys in this picture, right? I also have Michael Aquino is part of the Temple of Set, S-E-T, and I'll have more about that later. But I have information about what they read, what does Glenn Campbell mean, and all that stuff. So I have links to all of that down below. Okay, so let's get over here and get going. So what I'm going to be doing is combine this file with the other file because I have all of these loose details that I really want to share. Okay, so let me see here. Okay, they say that in traditional genealogies, Clan Campbell, the clan's origins are in the ancient Britons. So they say the earliest written records 1263, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's a lot of information. Should you be interested in the genealogy of where Michael Aquino comes from? But they say between 1200 and 1500, the Campbells, and remember the Campbells is a C, right? That's a three-letter. C is three. The Campbells emerged as one of the most powerful families in Scotland, dominant in Argyll, and capable of wielding a wider influence and authority from Edinburgh to the Hebrides and Western Highlands. So they say that early in the 14th century, the family of Colin Campbell, that's Colin, C-O-L-I-N, Campbell, became firm supporters of King Robert the Bruce. So yeah, there was a lot to do with their family and the money and the war and all that stuff. Some of this stuff you're going to need to explore on your own. I'm not going to be going through every single detail. So should you be interested, all of the files will be down below. And if you're interested in doing more of the genealogy, it will certainly give you a good place to start. So Aquino, he was decorated with a Purple Heart, right? For wounds received during combat. His mother, Marion Dorothy Elizabeth Ford, she was affectionately known as Betty Ford. Now, her last name was Ford, right? We also have the Ford family. So, Marlin Dorothy Elizabeth Ford was Aquino's mother. She was also known as Betty Ford. And this is where it gets interesting. They always write themselves to being such brilliant people, right? So Betty Ford was a child prodigy, of course, very smart young child, right? After only 3 years of early formal education, and at the age of just 14 years, she was enrolled as one of the youngest students ever admitted into Stanford University. 3 years later, she completed a BA degree in English, the youngest ever to receive such an honor at that time. So yeah, so mom was obviously groomed, and she also groomed the boy, right? Meaning Aquino. So, and remember, she likely did not birth Aquino. He came from a surrogate. So he relates to the Temple of Set, S-E-T. What does Set mean? Well, it means a whole bunch of different things, and I'll be getting down to that here in a minute. Because here is why we should have been more concerned about John de Camp in the beginning. Because when John de Camp wrote his book, they touted it as using documentation never before made public. De Camp lays bare not only the crimes, but the cover up. A textbook case of how dangerous the corruption of institutions of government and the press can be. Yeah, he was using documentation never made public because when they do a sweep with the FBI, what happens is that's to control the paperwork, right? So de Camp being one of them, of course he had access to paperwork. So when you find somebody that you think is a good person and they have documentation that how'd they get that? Got to kind of wonder, right? So let's get back to Aquino here. According to sworn testimony given before a U.S. Senate, this was in 1980, MK Ultra mind control victim Kathy O'Brien claimed that she was programmed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky in 1980 by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino of the U.S. Army. She stated that Aquino used barbaric trauma techniques on both her daughter Kelly and herself that involved NASA technology. Kathy O'Brien claimed that she was a presidential model monarch sex slave, meaning that she was specifically programmed to cater to the sexual perversions of the high-ranking politicians in the United States. She stated that during her time as a sex slave, which started as a child, she serviced a number of well-known politicians, including both Bill and Hillary Clinton, Ronald Reagan, Pierre Trudeau, Brian Mulroney, George H.W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Governors Lamar Alexander, Richard Thornburgh, Bill Bennett, Senator Patrick Leahy, Senator Robert Byrd, who she says was her handler. So she claims that Senator Robert Byrd was her handler, and Arlen Specter. O'Brien eventually gave testimony before the U.S. Senate regarding the events she was forced to go through, and although she named her perpetrators, not one of them dared to challenge or accuse her of slander. Sex slave victim Paul Bonacci, remember Paul Bonacci, Bonacci. Paul is from the Franklin case, so we still have Paul in the picture here, right? Paul Bonacci says he was a sex slave victim also, and as a child, he was directly involved in the abduction of Johnny Gosch, the kid in Iowa. Remember the kid that supposedly got abducted in Iowa? Johnny Gosch supposedly became that Gannon guy that showed up mysteriously at the White House. Gannon showed up out of nowhere, got special privileges under the Bush White House. Likely going to be the same kid. That was a misdirection. But here's what Bonacci said. He said the abduction was ordered by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who later picked Gosch up at a farmhouse he was being held at and delivered him to a buyer in Colorado. For years, both boys were used for the pedophilic pleasure of high-ranking government officials. And then in 1985, I'm following a genealogy of where I think some of this MK7 stuff got going and where they were doing some experiments. 1985, allegations of ritual abuse at the Jubilation Daycare Center at Fort Bragg erupted when several children reported being sexually abused by a number of people at the daycare center and several other locations, including at least 2 churches. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino was identified as having been present at one of those churches. 1986, November, allegations emerged regarding sexual abuse being perpetrated at the U.S. Army's Presidio Child Development Center in San Francisco. Within a year, at least 60 victims were identified, all between the ages of 3 and 7. Victims told of being taken to private homes to be abused, and at least 3 houses were positively identified, one of them being Aquino's. And this is going to be graphic, and this is just the way it's going to go because we're not going to hide the details. So I do apologize. I do apologize in advance, but I'm not going to start cutting them a break and cutting out the graphic stuff because it defines who they are and what they will do, okay? So one of them being Aquino's house. They also describe being urinated and defecated on and being forced to ingest urine and feces. Irrefutable medical evidence documented the fact that these children were sexually abused, including 5 who had contracted chlamydia and many others who showed clear signs of anal and genital trauma consistent with violent penetration. Even before the abuse was exposed, the children were exhibiting radical changes in behavior, including temper outbursts, sudden mood shifts, and poor impulse control. And what's interesting is Aquino's wife is named Lilith. Remember Lilith from the Bible stuff? Both Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino and his Satanist wife Lilith were positively identified by victims as 2 of the perpetrators. At least one victim was able to positively identify Aquino's home and describe with uncanny accuracy the distinctly satanic interior of the house. Only one person was ever charged for the abuse of one child, and these charges were dismissed 3 months later. 1987, August the 14th. As part of the Presidio investigation, a search warrant was served on the residence of Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino and his wife Lilith, and numerous videotapes, photographs, photo albums, photographic negatives, cassette tapes, and address books were confiscated. Also observed during the search was what appeared to be a soundproof room that may have been used as a torture chamber. Still in 1987, but November, we moved from August to November, the U.S. Army received allegations of child abuse at 15 of its daycare centers and several elementary schools. There were also at least 2 other cases of Air Force care centers and another one at a center run by the U.S. Navy. In addition to these, a special team of experts were sent to Panama to help determine if as many as 10 children at the Department of Defense Elementary School were molested and possibly infected with AIDS. It looks to me like what they were doing was using their military schools and stuff to do their experimentation, right? Full disclosure, I was raised on U.S. military bases, and when my father was in the U.S. Air Force, he served as a navigator and flew during Korean War. Fortunately, we only were in military schools when my father was stationed in Spain, but other than that, my family had us live in civilian housing and go to regular schools. Thank God. Okay, so another case also emerged in a U.S.-run facility in West Germany. These cases occurred at some of the most esteemed military bases in the country, including Fort Dix, Fort Leavenworth, Fort Jackson, and West Point. In the West Point case alone, by the end of the year, 50 children were interviewed by investigators. There were reports of satanic acts, animal sacrifices, and cult-like behavior among the abusers. An investigation led by former U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani, I guess that's Rudy, right? So that's got to be a sketchy investigation. So an investigation led by former U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani produced no federal grand jury indictments. Well, yeah, of course, Rudy Giuliani is a total crook, right? The last time I saw a picture of Rudy Giuliani, he was so stoned out of his mind. He had obviously dyed his hair that day or something, and he had brown hair dye dripping down his face when he was madly foaming at the mouth. Yes, there are people really get quite insane as they get older. It's a history of drugs that drives them that way. Okay, so Rudolph Giuliani produced no federal grand jury indictments. What a shocker. His investigation concluded that only 1 or 2 children were abused in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. And I also have information here in one of these files that I'll be sharing with you today, exactly how they set up the plan to discredit the children. Okay, so now we're 1988, still in November. The FBI raided the Franklin Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska, run by a man named Lawrence King. In the process, they uncovered evidence relating to drug running, pedophilia, pornography, and satanic activity involving prominent individuals in the local community. A former U.S. Army lieutenant colonel in the DIA Psychological Warfare Division, Michael Aquino, is the latest in a line of alleged government-sponsored sadists. Aquino, an eccentric genius obsessed with Nazi pagan rituals, founded the Temple of Set, an offshoot of Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. Aquino was connected with the Presidio Army-based daycare scandal, in which he was accused of child molestation. Much to the dismay of the young victim's parents, all charges were dismissed. Codename Malcolm, M-A-L-C-O-L-M. Aquino was reported to have developed training tapes on how to create a monarch slave and worked as a liaison between government, military, intelligence, and various criminal organizations and occult groups in the distribution of monarch slaves. And let me see here. It says, read here. What does that mean? I always click on all these links because you never know what they're going to say, right? Whenever I find a link, always open up those links because I was reading along and I just happened to find a thing that said, all it said was click. I clicked, and that led me to this report about this mindset business that I'll report to you later. So this is Project Monarch. Amidst the subtle, let me see here. I'm going to just leave this file open and get back to it in a minute here, but it looks like it's something we should, yeah. We need to look at all this stuff. Okay. Because it talks about the history of control, the evolution, when it all got started. The name monarch is not necessarily defined when the context of royal nobility, but rather refers to the monarch butterfly. When a person is undergoing trauma induced by electroshock, a feeling of lightheadedness is evidenced, as if one is floating or fluttering like a butterfly. There is also a symbolic representation pertaining to the transformation or metamorphosis of this beautiful insect. From a caterpillar to a cocoon to a butterfly, the new creation, which will return to its point of origin. Such is the migratory pattern that makes this species unique. Occult symbolism may give additional insight into the true meaning. Psyche is a word for both soul and butterfly, coming from the belief that human souls become butterflies while searching for a new reincarnation. Yeah, I think they're trying to flip these people into being butterflies, right? Because it's coming from the belief that human souls become butterflies while searching for a new reincarnation. Some ancient mystic groups, such as the Gnostics, saw a butterfly as a symbol of corrupt flesh. The angel of death, remember Mengele, in Gnostic art was portrayed crushing the butterfly. A marionette is a puppet that is attached to strings and is controlled by the puppet master. Hence, monarch programming is also referred to as the marionette syndrome. Or imperial conditioning is another term used, while some mental health therapists know it as conditioned stimulus response sequences. Project Monarch could best be described as a form of structured disassociation and occult integration. in order to compartmentalize the mind into multiple personalities within a systematic framework. During this process, a satanic ritual, usually involving Kabbalistic mysticism, is performed with the purpose of attaching a particular demon or group of demons to the corresponding altar. So, this disassociation stuff, right? Well, who also talked about that? Cleckley. Cleckley was the one who introduced this idea in that movie called All About Eve. That was a story of a woman who had multiple personalities. What were they trying to tell us? Well, from going from memory, because I did see that movie, and if you look on my main page, I have all of the reasons why I'm saying this, because Cleckley did a lot of really horrible things, right? So that All About Eve business was this woman who was horrifically tortured by her mother, of course, right? And literally, I won't go into the details, but I can still remember some of them, and it's been years ago. So he was obviously giving us a message about these disassociated personalities, right? Multiple personalities, they were calling it. I think what Cleckley was probably doing was probably trying to introduce to us that, hey, everybody can have multiple personalities, right? And look, this movie about Eve, this woman, she got multiple personalities. So if your kid is having trouble, maybe your kid has multiple personalities. See, so probably a misdirection, right? To get us thinking that, yeah, multiple personalities are just something that happened to some kids. Lucky it didn't happen to your kid, but yeah, some kids get multiple personalities. So then we would think, yeah, it just happens all the time. Maybe some people get lucky, maybe some people get it, maybe some people don't. Which is interesting about all of this, because when I refused the medication, what did they want me to do? They were really push me to try to get me to do electroshock treatment. They tried to gun after me and said, hey, it's not as bad as you may think it is. We really recommend that for people in your case who don't want to be on medication. And when I refused, I was literally, and I mean literally, walked out of the office. That psychiatrist, who in the past had been rather friendly, when his face kind of glazed over when I said, no, thank you, because I asked them to take me off the medication. They said, no, I had to do it on my own. Yes, I had a lot of issues with that. But anyway, so he changed from the friendly guy to the cold-faced stone killer that he was, and stood up and literally walked across the room, opened the door, and said, we are done. So yeah, I was tossed out in the cold, and everybody around me thought that me going off medication was further indicators that I was crazy, right? Well, they identify some of us and gun us to death with pills to convince everybody around us that we're crazy, right? So when we start talking about things, they're all seeing us through the lens of being crazy, right? So if I were to say something like when I said, I choose to not take medication, well, to people who have accepted doctors and stuff, it appears to them 100% that that is only the decision that a true crazy person would make. So every move that I made people think that it was actually confirming. So when I wanted to go off medication, well, that was more confirmation than they were right to put me on medication in the first place, because wanting to go off it was a big indicator that they were right and I was crazy. And that's how it all works, because then no one will ever listen to us, right? So anyway, so let me get back here. So a former military officer connected to the DIA, which is the disassociated stuff, told this writer, in the big picture, these people, monarch victims, are in all walks of life, from the bum on the street to the white-collar guy. In corroboration, a retired CIA agent vaguely discussed the use of such personnel to be used as plants or chameleons for the purpose of infiltrating a designated group, gathering information, or injecting an ulterior agenda. There are an inordinate amount of alters in the victim survivor with numerous backup programs, mirrors, and shadows. A division of light side good and dark side bad alters are interwoven in the mind and rotate on an axis. One of the main internal structures, of which there are many within the system, is shaped like a double helix, Helix, consisting of 7 levels. Each system has an internal programmer which oversees the gatekeeper, meaning the demons, who grant or deny entry into the different rooms. So a few of the internal images predominantly seen by the victim survivors are trees, the Kabbalistic tree of life with adjoining root systems, infinity loops, ancient symbols and letters, spider webs, mirrors or glass shattering, masks, castles, mazes, demons, monsters, aliens, seashells, butterflies, snakes, ribbons, bows, flowers, hourglasses, clocks, robots, chain of command diagrams, schematic of computer industry boards, circuitry boards, bloodlines and twinning. A majority of the victim survivors come from multi-generational satanic families and are ostensibly programmed to fill their destiny as the chosen ones or chosen generations. A term coined by Mengele at Auschwitz. So yes, full stop. This is what they were doing at Auschwitz. Yeah, were they drastically slicing and dicing some people up? Yeah, likely. Okay, likely. But I believe the majority of it was having to do with this programming. Some are adopted out to families of similar origin. Others used in this neurological nightmare are deemed as the expendable ones, non-bloodliners, usually coming from orphanages, foster care homes, or incestuous families with a long history of pedophilia. There also appears to be a pattern of family members affiliated with government or military intelligence agencies. Many of the abused come from families who use Catholicism, Mormonism, or charismatic Christianity as a front for their abnormal activities. Victims, survivors generally respond more readily to a rigid religious dogmat from religion, hierarchical structure, because it parallels their base programming. So yeah, what they're using is how people got programmed during their religious time, right? Because there's a certain amount of programming. I mean, I would say a lot of programming to accept that Bible and stuff, right? Because you got to make a lot of leaps of, well, you got to make a lot of leaps, right? You got to believe that all these pictures are really true. You got to believe that all these kind of insane stories are all true. In the Bible, they present both sides. So yeah, you already have your mind convinced that these things, which are really just drawings and stuff, are in fact true, right? So yeah, I think if you're highly religious, your brain has already made that leap from, yeah, all this stuff seems true, right? To, yeah, okay, more of this stuff. So the ultimate purpose of the sophisticated manipulation of these individuals may sound unrealistic, depending on our interpretation and understanding of the physical and spiritual realms. The deepest and darkest altars within bloodlines are purported to be dominant until the Antichrist is revealed. These New World Order altars supposedly contain callback orders and instructions to train and or initiate a large influx of people, possibly clones or soulless ones, thereby stimulating social control programs into the new millennium. Non-biological twinning is yet another bizarre feature observed within monarch programming. For instance, two young, non-related children would be ceremonial initiated in a magical soul bonding ritual, so they might be inseparably paired for eternity, possibly another Mengele connection. They essentially share two halves of the programmed information, making them interdependent upon each other. Paranormal phenomena such as astral projection, telepathy, ESP, etc., appear to be more pronounced between those who have undergone this process. And keep in mind, they're saying they can do a lot of these things, right? They make it sound like, yeah, I got it all organized, it's flawless, works like a charm. We don't want to assume that this is really working, right? They're kind of blundering along to a large degree, but I will keep reading here. Because just because they say they have millions of people out there, they can snap a finger and change their mentality. Well, maybe not, okay? It goes with the theory that I'd like to impress on you. We still need to keep questioning, right? We can't get into our our lazy boy chairs and say, yeah, makes sense to me. Okay, levels of monarch programming. Alpha, regarding as general or regular programming within the base control personality, characterized by extremely pronounced memory retention, along with substantiated increased physical strength and visual acuity. Alpha programming is accomplished through deliberately subdividing the victim's personality, which in essence causes a left brain, right brain division, allowing for a programmed union of left and right through neuron pathway stimulation. Beta, referred to as sexual programming. This programming eliminates all learned moral convictions and stimulates the primitive sexual instinct, devoid of inhibitions. Cat also they call cat alters may come out at this level. So beta is where they're getting that sexual programming. Delta, this is known as killer programming, originally developed for training special agents or elite soldiers. Optimal adrenal output and controlled aggression is evident. Subjects are devoid of fear, very systematic in carrying out their assignment. Self-destruction or suicide instructions are layered in at this level. Theta, considered to the psychic programming. Bloodliners, those coming from multi-generational satanic families, were determined to exhibit a greater propensity for having telepathic abilities than did non-bloodlines. Due to its evident limitations, however, various forms of electronic mind control systems were developed and introduced, namely biomedical human telemetry devices or brain implants, direct energy lasers. Now, see, this is where they start to get into the crazy zone, right? Do I think some people could be theta? Well, they say the theta ones are those coming from multi-generational satanic families, right? So they're describing themselves here, right? They were determined to exhibit a greater propensity for having telepathic abilities than the rest of us, right? Because we're the non-bloodliners, right? Well, they're pumping themselves up, right? Because they're talking about brain implants. Who else is talking about brain implants? Well, that lunatic Elon Musk, right? They don't have brain implants. Why would they need to have brain implants or hand chips in our hands? Because everybody is gripping a device, right? Isn't gripping that device about the same as implanting a chip under your hand? Well, to me, I would say yes. But that doesn't bring about the same fear as people thinking that they're going to put chips in our brains and chips in our hands. That is how you develop fear. You just come up with a bunch of stuff, lies and silliness that people interpret as the truth. because a lot of this stuff gets introduced from their scientific community. It gets introduced by Silicon Valley. So people think, oh, they're saying this stuff, so it must be true, right? Because listen to the Theta. Excuse me, the Theta was the one with the bloodline people, right? Okay, the next one is Omega, a self-destruct form of programming, also known as code green. So they say this program is generally activated when the victim survivor begins therapy or interrogation and too much memory is being recovered. So it's some self-destructive form that if you start talking to people, it's going to kick into gear, right? Well, I would say be careful of all these therapists. My whole horror and all this stuff with medication started with a therapist, a friendly therapist who also got my mother in the meeting and traumatized my whole family. So watch out for those sneaky therapists. So another form of another form interesting is gamma, right? Gamma rays, what they're getting us with. Gamma rays are the things they're using to eugenicize us, right? So gamma, another form of system protection, is through deception programming, which elicits misinformation and misdirection. This level is intertwined with demonology and tends to regenerate itself at a later time if inappropriately deactivated. Well, I don't think they're smarter about all this psychic stuff because why would they be using all the drugs they're using? Why do they have the history of alcohol and being zoned out of their minds? When people are out of their minds with alcohol and all kinds of other things, you're not looking at a happy, healthy society, are you? I would say these people all appear rather unhealthy to me. You look at their skin, you look at the crowd they hang around with, you look at how they all go after each other. These people are not functioning people. So to assume that they have higher levels of intuition, all that is just garbage, okay? Okay, methods. I'm going to be leaving some of this for you guys to look over, but for example, a prime example of how subliminal programming works is by looking at the recent Disney sensation Pocahontas, curiously billed as their 33, which is the highest degree in Scottish Rite Freemasonry. In the movie, Grandmother Willow is a mystical 400-year-old tree who counsels the motherless Pocahontas to listen to her heart and help her realize all the answers lie within. Grandmother Willow is constantly talking in doublespeak and using reversals. Sometimes the right path is not the easiest one, the esoteric derivative being the left path. The path that leads to destruction is the easiest one. See, they're always trying to lead us down their left path. And that's why they're bashing out their own left eyes. Covered this extensively. Go look for my show about that black eye club. That's why they're getting these black and screwy looking left eyes. If you start to look for people on the screen, because if they're on the screen, they're highly likely on the team, meaning they have gone through the sodomy and all this stuff themselves. When you see them barely able to open their left eye, you know they've been undergoing recent treatments, right? I saw an interview with that old liar Bernie Sanders recently. I swear to God, Bernie Sanders could barely keep his left eye open. So let me get back to this movie. In Illuminati structured MPD systems, the willow tree represents the occult powers of Druidism. The intricate imagery of the tree's branches, leaves, and root system are very significant, as some of the dark spiritual properties associated with the willow tree programming. And they are, the branches are used to whip victims in rituals for cleansing purposes. A willow tree can endure severe weather disturbances, i.e. storms, and is known for its pliability or flexibility. Victim survivors of the programming describe the willow's branches wrapping around them with no hope of escape. The deep root system of the willow tree makes the victim survivor feel as if they are falling deeper and deeper into an abyss while in a hypnotic trance. So, the willow tree, right? So, Stephen King's numerous novels and subsequent movies are purported by credible sources to be used for such villainous purposes. One of his latest books, Insomnia, features a picture of King with the trigger phrase, "We never sleep," indication of someone with multiple personalities or DID below an all-seeing eye. A partial list of other mediums used to reinforce base programming are Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. Well, it's really all of them, right? So it is difficult to figure out who the original programmer of this satanic project was, due to the substantial amount of disinformation and cross-contamination propagated by the powers that be. So let me see here. There is a ton to this report. I would encourage you. I am not in a position to read you this entire report. And remember, we all need to understand this information. It's not just a matter of how well I understand the information. If I just wanted to understand the information for myself, then why would I share it with you online? That was my whole purpose years ago. In case you forgot, I started out with my whole show online because I'd written my book. I got a couple offers to turn it into a podcast. That sounded like a horrible idea to me because even though it would represent a lot of money, I had this idea that down the road they would probably own my work, right? Which I was right. But at the time, it was a very hard position to take. When you're poor and you haven't done anything to really make a lot of money and you write a book and you get a good offer, people look at you sideways. Why would you turn down that money? Because instinctively, I saw it as a very bad idea. So then I decided that I wanted to write more about the children, what was going on, because I said years ago, I will get to the bottom of what's going on with the children. I've kept my word. So I decided that I could either gather all the information and go away and write a book, or I would try something completely new, which has frankly been quite misunderstood by a lot of people. So I decided that instead of writing a book, I would in fact write a book as I was going along and share each little vignette online as I discovered each element. I'm very thankful that I did all that, because now that I have gathered all this information, I certainly would not be in a position to write a book about it all. So I stand by my choice to share as I go along, because that way, now we all know the information, right? Because had I gathered all this up, waiting to write the book, well, I'm pretty much, my system is winding down. I've got end-stage lung cancer. I've got all kinds of things from all this stuff that have been happening. So I'm glad I made my decision. Was it hard remaining poor all this time to stick by my decision? Of course it was. But you know what? Never underestimate what we can do if we really set out to do it. And I also felt from the very beginning that it's not just a matter of me understanding this stuff. It's a matter of how do we all understand this? Because obviously, collectively, we all walked into a pretty big trap here, right? And I see for the future, the only way when we reincarnate again, better luck next time, right? So let me keep reading here, and then I'll be closing off this file in a minute, and then I'll be back to the other one. This is just my big data dump today. I'm dumping data on you. So buckle up, buckwheats. Here we go. Okay, so let me see here. Mengele, his unprecedented research at the expense of thousands of lives undoubtedly was a significant bonus to U.S. interests. Because of the pseudonym Dr. Green, I don't know. Oh, yeah, we're still talking the same people. Okay. Because of the pseudonym Dr. Green, so I guess he used a pseudonym, Dr. Green. Survivors knew him as Batchin or Daddy. They always call themselves Daddy, right? Shoner Joseph. So Mengele would disarm people with his gentle demeanor, while at other times he would explode into violent rages. Yeah, how a psychopath operates, right? Other characteristics remembered by survivors were the cadence of his shiny black boots as he paced back and forth and his I love you not, Daisy game. When he pulled off the last Daisy pedal, he would maliciously torture and kill a small child in front of the other children he was programming. Distraught survivors also recalled being thrown naked into cages with monkeys who were trained to viciously abuse them. Evidently, Mengele enjoyed reducing people to the level of animals. He would purposely restrain his victims from crying, screaming, or showing any excessive emotion. Dr. Ewan Cameron, also known as Dr. White, was the former head of the Canadian, American, and World Psychiatric Associations. Because of Cameron's extensive experience and credentials, the CIA's Alan Dulles, remember our old friend Alan Dulles? Alan Dulles funneled millions of dollars throughout organizations like the Society of Investigation of Human Ecology, which Cameron ruthlessly presided over. Experiments were conducted at several locations in Montreal, mostly at McGill University, St. Mary's Hospital, and Allen Memorial Institute. Besides the conventional methods of psychiatric tyranny, such as electroshock drug injections and lobotomies, Cameron conceived the technique of psychic driving, while unsuspecting patients were kept in a drug-induced coma for several weeks and administered a regimen of electroshocks, while electronic helmets were strapped to their heads and repetitive auditory messages were transmitted at variable speeds. Many of those exploited were abused children who had been run through the Roman Catholic orphanage system. Not surprisingly, Dr. Cameron has been conveniently left off of most psychiatric journals. This may have been, in fact, largely due to Project MKUltra being publicly exposed in 1970 through lawsuits filed by Canadian survivors and their families. The CIA and Canadian government settled out of court as not to be required to officially admit to any wrongdoing. A former U.S. Army lieutenant colonel in the DIA Psychological Warfare Division, Michael Aquino, is the latest in a line of alleged government-sponsored sadists. Aquino, an eccentric genius obsessed with Nazi pagan rituals, founded the Temple of Set, an offshoot of Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. Aquino was connected with the Presidio Army Base daycare scandal in which he was accused of child molestation. Much to the dismay of the young victim's parents, all charges were dismissed. Codename Malcolm, Malcolm, Aquino was reported to have developed training tapes on how to create a monarch slave and worked in liaison with government, military intelligence, and various criminal organizations and occult groups in the distribution of monarch slaves. Heinrich Müller was another important programmer who went under the codename Dr. Blue, or GOG, G-O-G. He apparently has two sons who have carried on the trade. The original Dr. Black was apparently Leo Wheeler, the nephew of deceased General Earl G. Wheeler, who was the commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Vietnam War. So the commander of the Joint Chief of Staffs during the Vietnam War had a son. He had two sons who carried out the trade. So, yeah. Wheeler's protege, E. Humler, is active in the Northwest, along with W. Bowers from the Rothschild bloodline. Other alleged mastermind manipulators, past and present. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, we talked about him in the past. Gottlieb also has a relative now, Gottlieb, who was on the FDA and all that stuff. He's now running one of the pharmaceutical companies. Lieutenant John Alexander. Robert Dabney Anderson, U.S. Navy. Dr. James Monroe. Dr. John Lilly. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Narut. Dr. William Jennings Bryan. Dr. Bernard L. Diamond. Dr. Martin L. Ornay. Dr. Louise J. West. Dr. J. Litton. Dr. Harris Isbell. Colonel Wilson Green. In order to keep MK Ultra from being easily detected, the CIA segmented its subprojects into specialized fields of research and development at universities, prisons, private laboratories, and hospitals. So all they did was they segmented it, right? After they got caught, they wanted to keep it from being detected. So they divided it, right? That's how they run everything. How do you think they divide the military up? Because it's a cult, right? So they divide it into groups. For example, when my father was in Korea and they were doing all that horrific bombing there, where would my father have gone at night to talk to his other military buddies? Well, that would have been the officers' club. My mom used to say that the military had so many alcoholics because of the cheap drinks they served at the officers' club. I think my mom was onto something, but I think she didn't get it quite right. The only way people like my father likely processed all of this was by sharing with other people in the same situation. The people who would have loaded the bombs that my father would have been involved in dropping, they would have been the airmen. They would have gone to the Airmen's Club. They would not have hung out with my dad after all this happened. Everybody was divided. But sadly, the two people on that plane who would have known where the bombs were being dropped would have been the pilot and my father. My father was the navigator. So the airmen likely didn't know what was in those bombs. Nobody knew. But I'm guessing that the pilot and my father knew because that's how it worked. I'm going to put this on hold for a second here. I was born when my father was fighting in Korea. My mom had to have me all on her own because he was gone. This is what the military does to us. They torture children. It's a cult. This whole world is set up like a cult. I'm more convinced about that every day. The names and locations of some of the major institutions involved in monarch program experimentation were Cornell, Duke, Princeton, UCLA, University of Rochester, MIT, Georgetown University and Hospital, Maimonides Medical Center, St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., Bell Laboratories, Stanford Research Institute, Westinghouse Friendship Laboratories, General Electric, ARCO, Mankind Research Unlimited. The final product was and is usually created on military installations and bases where maximum security is required, referred to as reprogramming centers or near-death trauma centers. The most heavily identified are China Lake Naval Weapons Center, the Presidio, Fort Detrick. Hello, Virginia. You people really are fuckers. I'm after you again today. My mood of yesterday has shifted, Fort Detrick. You're back on my radar. Okay, I'll keep reading. Fort Detrick, Fort Campbell, Fort Lewis, Fort Hood, Redstone Arsenal, Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Offutt, Offutt, Patrick Air Force Base, McClellan Air Force Base, McGill Air Force Base, Kirkland Air Force Base, Nellis Air Force Base, Homestead Air Force Base, Grissom Air Force Base, Maxwell Air Force Base, Tinker Air Force Base. Other places recognized as major programming sites are Langley Research Center, Los Alamos National Laboratories, Tavistock Institute, areas in or by Mount Shasta, California, Lampe, Missouri, and Las Vegas, Nevada. So the most publicized case of monarch monomania has surfaced through the book Transformation of America, the true life story of a CIA slave by Kathy O'Brien. On the back cover, it emphatically states, Kathy Bryan is the only vocal and recent survivor of the Central Intelligence Agency's MK Ultra Project Monarch mind control operation. This documented autobiography contains compelling accounts of O'Brien's years of unrelenting incest and eventually being introduced into Project Monarch by her perverted father. I'm also reading a lot of these kids. What they're doing is they're hauling kids off when they're 3 years old to do the intro deal, right? But from what I'm kind of understanding is the families are, when the kids are turning 3, the family members put them through these rituals, and that may be the only ritual they're putting them through. I think this is just about breaking us, right? Same reason how they broke all those people in Germany, or at least attempted to, right? If you go around and rape the entire country, like what happened with those women in Germany, well, you've broken their souls, right? I mean, I'm not saying irreparably broken, but you have put a dent in that entire population, right? This documented tells by her perverted father, okay, along with co-author Mark Phillips, her rescuer and deprogrammer, Kathy covers an almost unbelievable story of conspiratorial crime, forced prostitution, white slavery, and those in the upper echelons of world politics, covert assignments as a drug mule, and she was also a courier, and the country Western music industry's relationship with illegal CIA activities. And then we get back into this Paul Bonacci. Now, I am not sure about Kathy O'Brien, but I'm not going to be reckless and just off the cuff start saying she's not real, right? But I think we need to, if you decide to base your facts on Kathy's work, I would suggest taking a little closer look first, right? So, Paul Bonacci, still don't know about him. Paul Bonacci, he came out of Franklin, a courageous survivor who endured almost 2 decades of degradation under Project Monarch, has disclosed strong corroborating evidence of wide-scale crimes and corruption from the municipal state level all the way up to the White House. Paul Bonacci has testified about sexually abused males selected from Boys Town in Nebraska and taken to nearby Offutt Air Force Base, where he says they were subjected to intense Monarch programming, directed mainly by Commander Bill Piemon and former Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. After thoroughly tormenting the young boys into mindless oblivion, they were used, along with girls, for pornographic and prostitution with several of the nation's political and economic power brokers. Bonacci recalled being transported from the Air Force Base via cargo planes to McClellan Air Force Base in California. Along with other unfortunate adolescents and teens, he was driven to the elite Bohemian Grove. The perpetrators took full advantage of these innocent victims, committing unthinkable perversions in order to satisfy their deviant lusts. Some victims were apparently murdered, further traumatizing already terrified and broken children. And yeah, they seem to do this in most all these cases to do crowd control, right? They'll round up a group of let's say, boys that they're going to be controlling, right? First thing they'll do is one of them will have kind of a big mouth. First thing they do is make an example out of that one. That's what I've been talking about with this monkey see, monkey do business, right? So they show the victims that, well, you keep speaking out. Look what happened to so-and-so. They do that all the time here, too. People are afraid of losing their life. They're like, well, stay away from this person because the CIA might kill them. Well, they'll murder everybody, right? I just happen to have not been murdered quickly enough by them, right? So, anyhow, deprogrammers and exposers. So there were people who expose this. Dr. Gordon Hammond, a psychologist from the University of Utah, delivered a stunning lecture entitled Hypnosis and MPD Ritual Abuse at the 4th Annual Eastern Regional Conference on Abuse and Multiple Personalities, June 25th, 1992, in Alexandria, Virginia. He essentially confirmed the suspicions of the attentive crowd of mental health professionals, wherein a certain percentage of their clients had undergone mind control programming in an intensively systematic manner. Hammond alluded to the Nazi connection, military, and CIA mind control research, Greek letter and color programming, and specifically mentioned the Monarch program in relation to a form of operative conditioning. Shortly after his groundbreaking speech, he received death threats. Not wanting to jeopardize the safety of his family, Dr. Hammond stopped disseminating any follow-up information. Mark Phillips, a former electronic subcontractor for the Department of Defense, was privy to some of the top secret mind control activities perpetuated by the U.S. government. His inquisitive demeanor, strong conscience, and heartfelt concerns for Kathy O'Brien, a presidential model under Project Monarch, prompted him to reveal the inner workings of his grand deception beginning about 1991. As the story goes, he helped Miss O'Brien escape from her captors and was able to deprogram her in about a year's time in Alaska. The controversial Phillips has his share of critics who are skeptical of the veracity of his claims. So Mark Phillips is the one who was an electronic subcontractor for the DOD. He claims he was the one who deprogrammed Kathy O'Brien. New Orleans therapist Valerie Wolf introduced 2 of her patients before the President's Committee on Human Radiation Experiments on March the 15th, 1995, in Washington, D.C. The astonishing testimony made by this New Orleans therapist, Valerie Wolf, introduced 2 of her patients to the Physicians Committee on Human Radiation. Now, I've talked a lot about this President's Committee on Human Radiation. That was the one where Bill Clinton came out, "We're so sorry. It happened in the past. We're not going to." So they got caught doing human radiation experiments, right? Well, I've been saying all along, after they got caught, what did they do? Well, they introduced smart meters into our homes. So this New Orleans therapist talking before this committee, right? So the astonishing testimony made by these 2 brave women included accounts of German doctors, torture, drugs, electroshock, hypnosis, and rape, besides being exposed to the undetermined amount of radiation. Both Wolf and her patients stated they recovered their memories of the CIA program without regression or hypnotic techniques. Wolf presently devotes much of her time to counseling such survivors. A former labor attorney for Atlantic Richfield Company, David E. Rosenbaum, conducted a 9-year investigation from 1983 to 1982 concerning allegations of physical abuse and coercion, conditioning of numerous employees at an ARCO plant in Monarch, Pennsylvania. He had clients, Jerry Doley and Ann White, were victims of apparent radiation exposure. But as Mr. Rosenblum probed deeper in the subsequent interview sessions, a Pandora's box was unveiled. His most astonishing conclusion was that Jerry Doley and Ann White were likely the offspring of Adolf Hitler, based on part on the uncanny resemblance from photos, facial features, bone structure, and size were taken into consideration. Rosenbaum also states they both exhibit feelings and experiments that indicate they are twins. Doley and White were allegedly subjected to torture of many kinds while under drug-induced hypnosis, with each one undergoing at least 3 training techniques by plant physicians. Each victim was trained to enter into a hypnotic state upon the occurrence of specific stimuli, usually involving a cue word or phrase, and trained to remember or forget what transpired in the hypnotic state. They were repeatedly subjected to identical stimulus response sequence to produce nearly automatic reactions to the particular status. MK Ultra veteran Dr. Bernard Diamond, Dr. Martin Orn, and Dr. Joseph Mengele regularly visited the ARCO plant, according to Rosenblum. The special conditioning of Dole and White was intended for the artificial creation of dual German personalities. Rosenbaum, who is Jewish, has maintained a deep friendship with the two, despite these seemingly precarious circumstances. Other renowned therapists involved in the deprogramming are Cynthia Burtis, Pamela Munday, Steve Ogilvie, Bennett Braun, Jerry Mundays, and Colin Ross. Some Christian counselors have been able to eliminate parts of the programming with limited success. Journalists who have recently expounded on the subject were Walter Boart, Operation Mind Control, John Rappaport, U.S. government mind control experiments on children. Conclusion: the most incriminating statement to date was made by a government official as to the possible existence of monarch, as extracted by Anton Chalky, a writer for the publication The New Federalist. When former CIA Director William Colby, remember Colby who supposedly got murdered, right? William Colby, he was asked, "What about monarch?" He replied angrily and ambiguously, "We stopped that between the late 60s and the early 70s. Suffice to say that society, in its apparent state of cognitive disassociation, is generally in denial of the overwhelming evidence of this multiracial conspiracy. So, so they claim that when Monarch first got discovered, and they had the original testimonies, the colonel in charge of the program destroyed all the records. So this is pretty much picking up from where we are today. And here's an interesting clip I just spied at the bottom of the page here. And it says, a Montauk Project and Camp Hero Today. What does it say? This is about the Montauk Project and Camp Hero Today. Wait, what is this? Boy, we're really benefiting from all of these people who have left all this work for us, right? I'm going to put this link over there right now because in just glancing at it, this person has left us a pile of information to go through. So, all the way from belief systems, the illusion of choice, Montauk, the project that wouldn't die, troubled times at Camp Hero. Who's who on whose side? Well, I'm going to take a break here and I'm going to make sure that right now, before I forget, I will copy and paste this over to the show notes, which you will find at the bottom here, because this page, I'm going to put it up at the top because there are thousands, tons of links here. Not thousands, but you know what I mean. Okay, so this is called, that's why I'm saying always scroll through the bottom of these pages. So it's called the Montauk Project in Camp Hero Today. Tons and tons and tons of links on that page. So let me close it out with what's on that page. Because I've been running across this Montauk business for a while now. So this has just hordes and hordes of stuff. Let me click over this one that says, who's crazy anyways? Who's crazy anyways? Yeah, this file is really, really good. Our team is really uncovering some terrific information here. Uh, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. Agents of disinformation, the alien angle, what's that mean? I think they try to spin doctors operating, agents of disinformation. Another one bites the dust. What's real is real. The Philadelphia experiment. Yeah, there's a lot in this file that we should take a look at. I made a lot. No records of Air Force radar personnel from Montauk. Yeah, so somehow during this radiation conference, these two victims come forward. See how this works? That's why you got to keep digging and digging and digging. And they also have links to bloodlines. Let's see what that means. Research has shown that extraordinary high-level involvement on the part of certain families or clans or bloodlines. Yeah, I'll make a copy of this, right. Yeah, this includes all their bloodline stuff. So if you're interested in any genealogy, take a look at that also. This is really going to turn into more of a self-study course, right? Would be impossible for me at this stage to read all this stuff based on my current conditions. So yeah, it's all in that file. All those links will click to the same place. So just scroll down there and look for what I just said. So anyway, so don't avoid all those links down below. Well, you can avoid them if you want, not up to me. But if we remain uninformed, well, that's our choice, right? If we remain uninformed, that means we basically don't give a damn, right? I give a damn. So I'm hoping that in solidarity, everybody else is willing to keep looking also. I don't feel any personal responsibility to read all of this to you online because I feel like I will give you all of the things and give you my conclusions, but there's also a lot of homework that the rest of us could be doing in the meantime to see what else you can spot, right? Take a look at the whole, all these dynamics. Then pretty soon some words will start to make sense to you. So I'll be back in a bit. Hang in there. I'll be back in a bit. Okay, I'm going to be explaining how this also spread out, this MK7 business, right? We had an era called the Satanic Panic. It's a moral panic consisting of over 12,000 unsubstantiated cases of satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, starting in the United States in the 1980s, spreading through many parts of the world by the late 1990s, and persisting today. I think what was going on was this. This was how they were extending this stuff with this monarch abuse stuff, right? And it was really hiding in plain sight in front of all of us because during the 80s, there were all these places that were being accused of abusing children. So what I'd like to do is pinpoint one of the larger cases, which was the McDonald case, and that happened in California. Allegations initially brought together widely dissimilar groups, including religious fundamentalists, police investigators, child advocates, therapists, and clients in psychotherapy. The term satanic abuse was more common early on. This later became satanic ritual abuse and further secularized into simply ritual abuse. Over time, the accusations became more closely associated with dissociative identity disorder. So these kids got pegged with having dissociated identity disorder, right? Well, they were being trained to split their personalities, right? So that's how it worked. And next, I'll have information about how that whole thing got rigged up. So, goes on to say, rarely has such a strange and little understood organization had such a profound impact on media coverage of such a controversial matter. The False Memory Syndrome Foundation is an aggressive, well-financed PR machine adept at manipulating the press. It's called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And it's mobilizing a diverse army of psychiatrists, outspoken academics, expert defense witnesses, litigious lawyers, Freud bashers, critics of psychotherapy, and devastated parents. So, and this came out of the Columbia Journalism Review. So it was also called the false memory syndrome, right? If there is anyone who can relate to the sentiments expressed by the Presidio and West Point parents, it is the mothers and fathers of the children who attended the infamous McMartin preschool. The McMartin case was, and of course, the largest and most well-publicized of the multi-victim, multi-perpetrator ritual abuse cases that captured headlines in the 1980s. It was also a case that was grotesquely misrepresented by the media, both mainstream and alternative, perhaps nowhere more so than the appalling writings of national columnist Alexander Cockburn, who went so far as to write an op-ed piece entitled, "The McMartin Case, Indict the Children, Jail the Parents," which ran in the Wall Street Journal on February the 8th, 1990. Virtually everyone agrees that the children of McMartin were victimized. There is considerable debate, of course, over whether their victimization was by abusive caretakers or by overzealous therapists and prosecutors. Either way, Cockburn's stance on the case was unconscionable and should have sent a clear message to the progressive community that there were considerably more to the McMartin allegations that met the eye. The harsh reality is that the McMartin preschool, in conjunction with at least 2 other Manhattan Beach preschools and 1 babysitting service, was the center of a very large child prostitution and child pornography ring whose operations appear to have been protected and covered up by any number of local, state, and federal officials. A glimpse of the true nature and scale of the McMartin case is offered by an official correspondence from Sergeant Beth Dickerson of the LA County Sheriff's Department. And she wrote this to Agent Kenneth Lanning at the FBI's Academy of Behavioral Sciences in Quantico, Virginia. And it was dated February the 10th, 1985. She went on to say, in August 1983, the Manhattan Police Department began an investigation regarding allegations of sexual abuse occurring at the McMartin preschool. Altogether, approximately 400 children were evaluated by therapists at Children's Institute International. All interviews were videotaped, and 350 children disclosed sexual behavior. In all, the victims named 7 teachers, 6 women and 1 male, at the preschool as having molested them. These individuals are currently charged with 209 counts of child molestation. Also named are about 30 other individuals still uncharged, as well as numerous unidentified strangers. McMartin victims allege sexual abuse occurred on school grounds as well as at local markets, churches, a mortuary, various homes, a farm, a doctor's office, other preschools, and other unknown locations. Most children state they were photographed in the nude. They mentioned drinking a red or pink liquid that made them sleepy. Children disclose animal sacrificing of bunnies and ponies and turtles, and some of this occurred in churches. Victims describe sticks put in their vaginas and rectums and also being pooped and peed on. Children say that the adults sometimes dressed in black robes, formed a circle around them, and chanted. In May 1984, another preschool investigation began in the same policing jurisdiction, stemming from a McMartin victim who identified the Manhattan Ranch preschool as a place where he was being taken and molested. Additional children have begun disclosing sexual abuse, approximately 60, and they have named 6 or more additional suspects. These children talk of strangers coming to the school and molesting them, being taken off campus and molested, being photographed nude, and some talk of animals being abused. The children talk of being hit with sticks and being peed and pooped on. The resources of the police department and the district attorney's office were not sufficient in order to follow up on the multitude of uncharged suspects in both of the preschools. A task force became operational on November the 5th, 1984. It should be noted that the task force has 2 other preschools under investigation for alleged sexual abuse in addition to McMartin and the Manhattan Ranch. One is called the Learning Game Preschool and is clearly linked to McMartin. An astounding 460 children reported being sexually abused at the 3 closely linked Manhattan Beach schools. Even more astounding, investigative author Michael Newton, among others, has noted that Children's Institute International determined a full 80% displayed physical symptoms, including vaginal or rectal scarring, anal bleeding, painful bowel movements, and the anal wick reflex associated with violent penetration. The stories told by the victim witnesses are remarkably similar as to the nature of the abuse, the locations where the abuse took place, and the perpetrators of the abuse. And these were not, as is commonly believed, only preschool children telling such stories. Some of the witnesses were former students in their teens and 20s, and their stories corroborated those of the children. The older witnesses were not allowed to testify at the McMartin trials. Yeah, of course they weren't. So the older witnesses were not allowed to testify at the McMartin trials because the statute of limitations for the crimes committed had expired. Imagine that. Imagine that. So they couldn't show the jury that this had been going on for a long time because of the statute of limitations. Always a way to keep themselves out of trouble, right? Many of the younger witnesses were unable to offer testimony as well for various reasons, most notably because they were too severely traumatized. Even so, as author Jan Hollingsworth has pointed out, prosecutors had at their disposal more than 100 child witnesses as old as 11 and a truckload of medical reports bearing documentation of scarred genitals and anuses. The stories told by these children, it should be noted, were not fed to them by some diabolical team of therapists and headline-seeking journalists. Many of them were offered spontaneously to hundreds of parents and scores of child care specialists. And many of the victims of McMartin Preschool, all adults now, still tell the same stories today. Anyone suggesting that the allegations in the McMartin case were true and that a massive cover-up concealed the true nature of scope of the case is likely to be labeled a conspiracy theorist. The most preposterous conspiracy theory surrounding McMartin, however, has always been the notion that some cabal of overzealous therapists was able to implant false memories of heinous abuse in the minds of nearly 500 individuals and have them persist to today. So they said that there was a notion that some cabal of overzealous therapists was able to implant false memories. Despite the vast number of eyewitnesses, most of them bearing physical evidence of abuse, and despite the fact that the judge, who presided over more than a year of pretrial testimony, ruled that the state had more than enough evidence to proceed to trial, District Attorney Ira Reiner inexplicably dropped all charges against 5 of the 7 McMartin defendants on January the 17th, 1986. 6 days before that, he had summarily dismissed 2 prosecutors on the case. At least 3 dozen suspects who had been independently identified by numerous witnesses were never indicted at all. One of these was a man named Robert Winkler, who was arrested in neighborhood Torrance, California, and was charged with running a babysitting service out of the Cocoa Palms Motel that authorities described as a front for a sexual abuse ring. Children in the McMartin case recognized Winkler in news footage as the man they had known as the Wolfman. The kids described Winkler as being a frequent visitor to the school, who oftentimes delivered drugs for use in abusive rituals, which were sometimes conducted in churches, a cemetery, or a crematorium. The Wolfman, conveniently enough, turned up dead on the eve of his trial, allegedly of a drug overdose. Winkler, or the Wolfman, was not the only one to miss his day in court in conjunction with the McMartin case. Judy Johnson, the first McMartin parent to lodge a complaint, never delivered her scheduled testimony. Her body was found sprawled naked on the floor of her home. Her death said to be done due to complications from her chronic alcoholism. Before her death, she was regularly derided by defense attorneys and their media allies as a deranged crank. In truth, Johnson was not known to have any mental problems or a drinking problem before learning of the unthinkable abuse her child had suffered. Considered a key prosecution witness, Johnson received frequent threats before her death, and she was followed when she ventured out in public. Many of the other McMartin parents were openly skeptical of Johnson's stated cause of death. A former Hermosa Beach police officer named Paul Bynum, who had been hired by the parents of victims as a private investigator, turned up dead on the eve of his scheduled testimony as well. His death by gunshot was ruled a suicide, though those close to Bynum dispute that findings. Among other things, Bynum may have testified about his examination of the tunnel excavation project. So they did a tunnel excavation project because the kids were talking about tunnels underneath the school. And I remember all of this vividly. I think myself, when I read about the tunnels I thought the whole thing had jumped the tracks, and it looked like this stuff was being just crazy, right? Well, obviously it wasn't crazy. The fact that the children repeatedly, and they like these tunnels, they like basements, that whole thing in Belgium. Good morning, Belgium. That whole thing in Belgium with Marc Dutroux, that was built underneath. Remember the Hellfire Club, which I think eventually became the Bohemian Club? Hellfire Club had all those tunnels and stuff. They like these tunnels for some reason. So let me see. The fact that the children repeatedly told stories of tunnels under the property by which they could be secretly transported to and from the school. And remember, they also talked about tunnels under Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, right? There's a whole part of that Air Force Base in Omaha that's underground. You gotta wonder what's underground, right? I dug up some things about the early construction because kids had talked about going underground at Offutt Base, and I found some photos of when they were building those tunnels there. So yeah, I think these kids were all telling the truth. So let me start back up here again. Repeatedly told stories of tunnels under the property, and in which they were subjected to horrific abuse in a secret room, which I imagine these secret rooms were probably soundproof, right? And the secret room was frequently cited as proof that the children's stories were fabrications. It was universally accepted that the tunnels did not actually exist. And yes, I raised my hand. I thought the tunnels were fake. That being the consensus view of the media and law enforcement authorities. Nevertheless, while it is true that the investigation commissioned by District Attorney's Office found no evidence of tunnels, another investigation ignored by the media certainly did. Many of the parents not satisfied with the superficial examination by the DA's office and commissioned another investigation of the site when the property was sold in April of 1990. To lead the project, they hired E. Gary Stickle, Ph.D., a highly regarded archaeologist recommended to them by the chair of the interdisciplinary program of the archaeological department at UCLA. Stickle's resume included serving as a consultant to George Lucas on the Indiana Jones movies. Also brought on board were several other technical experts. As Stickle wrote in his report on the evacuation, by engaging a highly recommended professional archaeological team, the parents hoped to bring scientific authority to whatever might be found or a definitive resolution for whatever was not to be found. And what the team found was precisely what the children for the previous 7 years had been telling them they would find. The project unearthed not only one, but two tunnel complexes, as well as previously unrecognized structural features which defied logical explanation. Both tunnel complexes conformed to locations and functional descriptions established by children's reports. One had been described as providing undetected access to an adjacent building on the east. The other provided outside access under the west wall of the building and contained within it an enlarged cavernous artifact corresponding to children's descriptions of a secret room. Both the contour signature of the walls and the nature of recovered artifacts indicated that the tunnels had been dug by hand under the concrete slab floor after the construction of the building. Not only did the discovered features fulfill the research pre-qualifications as tunnels designed for human traffic, There was also no alternative or natural explanation for the presence of such features. If the stories of the children were bogus fantasies, there is no excuse for the tunnels discovered under the school. If there really were tunnels, there is no excuse for the glib dismissal of any and all of the complaints of the children and their parents. This investigation was completed before the McMartin trials concluded, and yet this devastating evidence was never presented in court by the prosecution team. The existence of this detailed report, complete with photographs and maps of the tunnel complex, was known to the local and national press, but it was never reported. To this day, it is denied that any tunnels ever existed under the McMartin preschool. The denial of the tunnels is necessary to maintain the illusion that the children were not credible witnesses, that illusion being an essential component of the cover-up. For if the children were credible, the implications run far deeper than the tunnels under the school. There are, for example, these stories being told by the children of being pimped out as child prostitutes in private homes and businesses all over the community. They also spoke frequently of being photographed and videotaped while being abused. District Attorney Robert Philbosian publicly declared the McMartin preschool to be an elaborate front for a massive child pornography operation. 23 parents filed a civil lawsuit making the very same claim. Other stories told repeatedly by the children were even more disturbing. They told of being forced to witness and participate in the ritual torture, killing, and mutilation of animals, and on one occasion of human babies and other children as well. They spoke of being forced to drink the blood and eat the flesh of these slaughtered corpses, of witnessing the beheading of infants, and of being forced to stab infants themselves. They told as well of being sealed in coffins with the mutilated corpses. And they spoke of being subjected to every sort of depraved sexual activity imaginable, including necrophilia, coprophilia, and bestiality. The abuse was of such stunning brutality that is almost beyond human comprehension that anyone could inflict such physical and psychological torture on children. And yet, these stories were soon being told by the thousands of other kids across the countries at preschool abuse cases spread like wildfire. Young children from all walks of life and from all sorts of the country were all telling similar stories of horrific ritual abuse. How was this possible? If they were all victims of false memories, how vast a conspiracy would be required for therapists all across the country to implant the very same memories in all of these children? Experts have noted that the victimized children show a level of knowledge that defies rational explanation if the kids have not experienced what they claim to have experienced. For instance, these child victims can accurately describe the look, smell, texture, and color of human viscera. This is an ability it has been argued that very few adults possess. And those who have been trained as surgeons or that's a smell, right? The smell, human viscera. These children also display a remarkable level of knowledge on a wide variety of unconventional human sexual practices, including many acts that, again, most adults do have knowledge or awareness of. If these children did not experience these things firsthand, then how did they gain such knowledge? In February 1985, Officer Sandy Gallant of the San Francisco Police Department submitted a report to her superiors, noting the similarities in numerous ritual abuse cases. She had gathered evidence from fellow officers and police departments across the country and summarized the evidence referenced in the police report submitted to her. An excerpt from her report reads as follows, and I'll read it. The information contained herein is distasteful and bizarre to such a degree that one would choose to discredit it. However, research that I have done in this area has revealed that numerous cases of this type have surfaced around the country and in Canada. The similarities in these stories of each child victim used in these crimes tend to give credibility to the information revealed by others. Additionally, the psychiatrists and therapists who have been treating the victims state that the consistency of their stories and the explicit details revealed cause them to believe that these children are telling the truth. It is also the belief of each law enforcement officer who submitted information for this report that the victims are being truthful and that, in fact, children would be unable to make such stories up. During my research, similarities began surfacing, which indicate the strong possibility that there exists a network of people in this country involved in the sexual abuse and possible homicides of young children. These cases appear to differ from isolated cases of abuse toward children in that crimes mentioned here have been committed with one common goal in mind, that of mutilating and murdering children for ritualistic or sacrificial purposes. Many of the cases reported also reveal the possibility of child pornography beyond the normal type of kiddie porn, in that these children are photographed during rituals with some members in robes and other garbs and candles, snakes, swords, altars, and other types of ritualistic material being used. So Gallant requested that the report be sent to the chief of police for him to review and then forward to the FBI. Following his review, however, the chief declined to submit the report. Gallant next tried to get the U.S. Department of Justice to review the paperwork, but she was rebuffed there as well. As for the McMartin case, there has never been any question that the children there were horrifically abused. Though rarely noted in press reports, the jurors were clearly of the opinion that there was, in fact, the case. So they actually had hung juries because it appears the jurors seemed to think that children were abused. The hung juries and acquittals in the various proceedings were the result of the jury members' inability to identify the perpetrators of the abuse, not the reflection of any belief that there wasn't any abuse. The jurors attributed their inability to identify the perpetrators to the inept presentation of the prosecutor's case. Imagine that. The prosecutor threw the case. Imagine that, right? Here in the United States, we are a country of laws. We go by the rule of law. All of our laws are designed to rape and satanically all the children that come in our hands, whether it be through daycare, babysitting. Our laws are to rape the children. Yes, they have instilled laws to effectively rape children now, haven't they, right? All this statute of limitation stuff. Yeah. And you notice also when they bring about these cases, right, when the kitchen's too hot, it always seems to happen. Maybe I'm just suspicious, right? But it always seems to happen when those statutes of limitations run out, right? And then they come to our attention. Oh, wait a minute. We found this big case. Oh, whoops. Too late. Too late. Too late. Statute of limitations are off. We're off the hook. I'll keep reading. Also, rarely, and remember, I've been at this for many, many years. If I'm sounding a bit exasperated, it's because I am, okay? I have been in a state of horror of my own for many years, so cut me some slack if I break out swearing and screaming today, okay? Also rarely noted in the reporting on the trial is that the matriarch of the McMartin family, Virginia McMartin, Virginia. Hello, Virginia. Funny her name is Virginia, right? Funny her name is Virginia. Okay, Virginia McMartin admitted on the stand that one of her own granddaughters believed that her own children had been molested at the school. Virginia McMartin, incidentally, was more than just your run-of-the-mill preschool operator. In the mid-1960s, she achieved a sort of semi-celebrity status in the child care field and traveled extensively as a consultant, including stops in New Zealand, Australia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and England. Okay, I gotta say this right now. Virginia McMartin, you had to have been a CIA asset. Clear as a bell, right? Your name is Virginia. Another notable see, I think Virginia was running around the world helping other daycare workers set up the same plan in their same places, right? Virginia is likely the key CIA asset setting all this up, right? Well, at least it appears that way to me, right? But remember, I've been classified as crazy in this country, so take what I say with a grain of salt because the CIA considers me insane, right? And of course, that means they consider themselves normal. Well, I don't consider raping children to be normal, okay? So call me crazy all you want. I'd rather be crazy than what you people think is normal. Another notable aspect of the McMartin trials is that the defense team was allowed to subject the children witnesses to the longest pretrial hearings in the nation's history, facing a battery of as many as 7 rabid defense attorneys. The already severely traumatized children were verbally assaulted for weeks on end in a deliberate attempt to break them. The state made little effort to protect these young victim witnesses. In the final analysis, the logical conclusion to be drawn from the McMartin case is that 460 children did not all conspire to lie about the abuse they suffered. They also did not likely lie about their involvement in child prostitution and child pornography. They certainly did not lie about the tunnels under the school. They probably did not lie about their forced involvement in satanic rituals in which adults, sheathed in black ceremonial robes, uttered chants. In fact, at least one such robe was seized from the home of a defendant. And perhaps most tragically, there is good reason to believe that they did not lie about the blood sacrifices either. So, I'm going to find this other file that I now need to go through. Let me see here. Okay. I tried to organize another file here about loose items that have to do with all these cases. When I was scanning around, I found an interesting comment in the comment section. Hang on a second here. Excuse me. And I was scanning around about comments about different things, right? It says, wow, small world. And it was an article, and it said, it took guts to write this article, and I'm sure it has with all of your posts. By the way, are you sure he isn't a tranny? His face sure looks like a woman. I'm just saying. So somebody was commenting on this article talking about Aquino. And they're saying, hey, thanks for writing this article. And really, I can't remember exactly what article it was. But anyway, so somebody was reading this article and they're saying, hey, I think Aquino looks like a tranny. And then somebody else said, he absolutely dresses like a tranny. I remember him before he sodomized me at a hotel when I was 6 or 7. He was wearing lingerie and high-heeled shoes and tucked his penis between his legs. He was seeing my reaction, and I was trying to giggle because I'd never seen that before, but felt really uncomfortable inside, obviously. Oh, and Michael taught me that if I screamed, devils would come in through my mouth and possess my body again. So this kind of confirms other things, right? Do these random people in this comment section, are they all lying? I don't think so. So let's take a look. And I really apologize for it. Lip smacking things, but in order for you to hear my voice, it has to be literally the microphone is an inch from my face, okay? So let's open up this MindWar thing that old Aquino wrote. Let me see here. MindWar. This was a document I found the other day, or somebody found it for me. I'm basically on autopilot at this point. Okay. MindWar. This was a document called MindWar, and I found it online, and it was written by, let me see here. Okay. It's called From Psyops to MindWar, The Psychology of Victory by Colonel Paul E. Valley. And Paul E. Valley is the boss of Michael Aquino, okay? Colonel Paul E. Valley, commander, with Major Michael A. Aquino. So the two of them wrote this report. It is called the Psyops Research and Analysis Team. So Michael's boss is Colonel Paul E. Valley. And let me just quickly, sorry I have to do these things while I'm thinking about it. Let's take a look at this dude real quick. Let's see what they say about him. Okay, I didn't copy it. Hang on here a second. I'm having to do my work in a different manner now because I'm trying not to leave myself loose details for later because, well, they start to pile up, right? Okay, so let me see. I got that one done. McMartin Preschool. I'm done with that one. Close that one out. I'm going to put this on hold for a second. Okay, what do we have here? I typed in Colonel Paul E. Valley, Commander, Wiki. That's all I typed in. I'm just trying to show you the simple little words that I have to use to find these people. But always start your searching over on Yandex, not as buried over there. Okay, Paul E. Valley, Vallely, born November 29th, 1939. Still alive, is a retired U.S. Army Major General and senior military analyst for Fox News. He served in the Vietnam War and retired in 1993 as Deputy Commanding General of the Pacific Command. In 2004, together with retired Air Force Lieutenant General Thomas McTierney, Valley co-authored the book Endgame, The Blueprint for the Victory in the War on Terror. So Valley, we have a bunch of stuff on him. And then we have something from the archives. I wonder what that is. From Psyops to Mind War. The Psychology of Victory by Colonel Paul. Okay, that's the same report that we have. Okay, so we already have that report. So let's get back over to that report. Okay, so we also have him under Wikipedia. Let me see what's he say under Wikipedia. Yeah, I kind of recognize the face. He's now 84 years old. He's living in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. Allegiance, USA. Service branch, U.S. Army. Yeah, pretty big name guy, right? So he was the boss. Valet graduated from West Point and was commissioned into the U.S. Army in 1961. So yeah, he's our guy, right? He did this. He wrote this report with his buddy. Okay, so and also the valet person, he threw a spoke in the wheel because he became a supporter of QAnon, that disinformation campaign. And he was described as a white hat operation. I got a cat coming up next to me. Here, let me put this in a hole real quick. Get back. Come on, back. Back. I don't want you to give the idea I'm sitting here yelling at my cat, but I got to keep her away from these forts. Okay, move on out of here. There you go. Okay, so what I've been trying to do because they're so sick is I'm feeding them several times a day, but it's also instigated another issue. But okay, so let me keep going here. Bless their little hearts, these poor cats, because they live with me, they've killed off all my pets so far. They're just waiting to kill me off. So, okay. So Valet, interestingly enough, connects to QAnon. So Valet also stated that he firmly believes Obama is a Muslim in nature. So yeah, he was also said to be a Tea Party group. Valet is a supporter of QAnon, which he described as a white hat operation and a cadre of retired military intelligence officers that is tied to information from a group of military intelligence specialists of over 800 people that advise the president. He has praised QAnon as a legitimate source that releases real intelligence, fact-based intelligence to the public. In 2020, he was also one of the 235 senior military leaders backing Donald Trump. Well, QAnon is all about Donald Trump's going to get into office and they're going to protect all the children, right? They're going to round up all the pedophiles. Well, looks to me like they're working both sides of the fence here, right? Because this guy and his buddy is Aquino wrote this other document. So after writing this document, this old dude comes out and becomes a QAnon person, right? Along with that Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn, also a transgender general. I looked at Michael Flynn years ago. I have his picture over on my elite page on my website. Michael Flynn is definitely married to a man. Because I'm not thinking that all of them are transgendered, but the top ones in the club, yeah, for sure, for sure. They're the ones missing the penis, right? But there could be a few of them in there, I don't know. Personally, the idea of going around and inspecting who has a penis or not kind of nauseates me a bit, right? So I never thought at my age I'd be online talking about men's penises in their pants or not. So yeah, so that's who that dude is. So he got enlisted to be the QAnon. And so many people were so wild about that QAnon. And then that brought up that really crazy woman, Amazing Polly. She was all about the QAnon stuff, also a transgender. Okay, so let's go back to this report. So now we know who the boss is, right? Vallely. That's who he is, okay? So Major General Paul E. Valet. Caravan to Midnight. I don't think you need to see. Oh, yeah, maybe we need to see this. Wait a minute. Born in Du Bois, Pennsylvania, he retired in 1992 from the U.S. Army as Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army, Pacific in Honolulu, Hawaii. General Valet graduated from the U.S. military at West Point and was commissioned in the Army in 1961. serving a distinguishing career of 31 years in the Army. Valet is a graduate of the Infantry School, Ranger and Airborne Schools, Jumpmaster School, and Command and General Staff School, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, and the Army War College. His combat service in Vietnam included positions as Infantry Command Commander, Intelligence Officer, Operations Officer, Military Advisor, and Aide-de-camp. He has over 15 years experience in special operations, psychological, and civil military operations. He served in many overseas theaters to include Europe and the Pacific Rim countries, as well as 2 combat tours in Vietnam. He has served on U.S. security assistance missions on civilian Army relations to Europe, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Syria, Iraq, and Kuwait, Turkey, Israel, Indonesia, and Central America. He has served on U.S. security assistance missions on civilian military relations to Europe. Oh, I already read that group. Okay. And his picture is looking creepily right at me as I'm reading this. Yes, he looks very transgender to me, but I'm not going to be reckless. I haven't taken a deeper look. Okay. But likely he is a man without a penis. Okay. But then on the other hand, they say that Aquino had to tuck his penis. So what is it? Do some of them have their penises? I don't know. I don't think that kid was lying that said he had sex with Aquino. So do some of them come intact with their penises? Well, we have to really keep all these things open, right? As disgusting as it is. So yeah, some of them may appear transgender, but they may in fact still have their penises. So General Millet has been a military analyst on television and radio. He is also a guest lecturer on national security, international political, economic issues, strategic planning matters, and the global war against radical Islam and other threats to America. So he is founder of these other groups. Yeah, that's all we need to know about this guy. Let's get back over. Let me scan one more quick second here. He and his wife, Marianne, are the co-trustees of the Scott Valley Soldiers Memorial Fund, and they reside in Montana. He and Mrs. Valet are deeply involved in several humanitarian issues, as well as supporting a multitude of community events and activities. Yeah, well, he's definitely deep in the excuse me. He's definitely deep into the plot here now, isn't he? So let me get back over this report. This report is only about it's only about 10 pages, okay? So the title, From Psyops to MindWar, the Psychology of Victory. Okay, let's see what they have to say here. Introduction by Michael Aquino. In the late 1970s, psychological operations, PSYOP, doctrine in the U.S. Army had yet to emerge from the disappointment and frustration of the Vietnam War. Thus, it was that in 1980, Colonel Paul Valet, commander of the 7th PSYOPS group, asked me, as his headquarters PSYOPS research and analyst team leader, to draft a paper that would encourage some future thought within the PSYOPS community. He did not want a Vietnam post-mortem, but rather some fresh and innovative ideas concerning PSYOPs and the evolution and application. I prepared an initial draft which Colonel Valet reviewed and annotated, which resulted in revised drafts and critiques until he was satisfied. And the result of that was this paper, which I'm going to be reading now. Colonel Volet also sent copies of it to various government officials, agencies, commands, and publications involved or interested in PSYOP. He intended it not as an article for publication, but simply as a talking paper to stimulate dialogue. In this, it was quite successful, judging by the extensive and lively letters he received concerning it over the next several months. This should have been the end of MindWar, a minor staff study which had done its modest job. But with the arising of the internet in the 1980s, however, MindWar received an entirely unexpected and somewhat comic resurrection. Allusions to it gradually proliferated, with its sinister title quickly winning in the most lurid conspiracy theory reputation. The rumor mill soon had it transformed into an Orwellian blueprint for Manchurian candidate mind control and world domination. My own image as an occult personality added fuel to the wildfire. MindWar is now touted by the lunatic fringe as conclusive proof that the Pentagon was awash in black magic and devil worship. Now that this absurdly comic operation has at least somewhat subsided, I thought that it might be interesting to make a complete and accurate copy of the papal available, together with an introduction and some historical hindsight annotations to place it in reasonable context. After all it did, and perhaps still does, it has something worthwhile to say. Within the U.S. military, Psyops had habitually been relegated to a backseat as a force multiplier. The principal strategic decisions are made in consideration of traditional political and military interests and goals. Only then is Psyops invited to the table to help achieve already agreed upon missions more efficiently. MindWar reverses this sequence. Psychological means for achieving victory, essentially through convincing the enemy that he really wants to bring his national policies into harmony with ours, are fashioned in support of basic political goals. The use of ordinary military force, bombs, bullets, etc., is regarded as a last result in circumstances wherein MindWar by itself fails. The advantage of MindWar is that it conducts wars in non-lethal, non-injurious, and non-destructive ways. Essentially, you overwhelm your enemy with argument. You see, hold on a second. Excuse me. Okay. Let's see here. Well, essentially, you overseize your enemy with argument. I've done quite a few shows about gaslighting. Take a look at those. You seize control of all of the means by which his government and populace process information to make up their minds, and you adjust it so that those minds are made up as you desire. Everyone is happy. No one gets hurt or killed, and nothing is destroyed. Ordinary warfare, on the other hand, is characterized by its lack of reason. The antagonists just maim or kill each other's people and steal or destroy each other's land until one side is hurt so badly that it gives up, or both sides are hurt so badly that they agree to stop short of victory. After such a war, there is lasting misery, hate, and suffering. The only loser in MindWar are the war profiteers, companies and corporations which grow fat on orders for helicopters, tanks, guns, munitions, etc. Consequently, what President Dwight Eisenhower referred to as the military-industrial complex can be counted upon to resist implementation of mind war as the governing strategy conflict doctrine. That's the mind war prospectus in its most simplified form. So he's basically saying, hey, we have a new way to cause wars, right? The war of the mind. I'll keep reading. While in the 1980s, I had no reason to think that this paper had any official effect upon U.S. Psyops doctrine within or beyond the Army. It was with some fascination that I saw specific of its prescriptions applied during the first Gulf War, and recently, even more obviously, during the 203 invasion of Iraq. In both instances, extreme psyops was directed both against the object of the attack and upon U.S. domestic public perception and opinion. In 2003, to the extent of embedding journalists with military units to inevitably channel their perspectives and perceptions. The impact of even those minor techniques of mind war was remarkable. A psychological climate of inexorable U.S. victory was created and sustained in both the United States and Iraq, which accelerated that victory on the ground. Somewhat less positively, the failure of mind war in this instance to be guided by only the most rigorous principles of truth and ethics had just and inexorably led to substantial post-victory evaporation and of euphoric climate. I don't get that, but anyway, therein lies the Achilles heels of post-victory. So therein lies the Achilles heel of mind war. Invoking as it does the most intense emotions and commitments of its audiences, it must deliver the goods as they are judged by the target audiences. If the ethical values of those audiences are not respected, if mind war is used only in the service of ulterior motives and objectives, the resulting detoxification can be socially shattering. In 1987, I wrote a more extensive research paper for the National Defense University concerning the ethics of psyops. Particularly if mind war is actually to be employed as a feature of U.S. foreign policy, I cannot stress too strongly the need for its subordination to the strictest and most enlightened principles of humanity, as discussed in that paper, Psychological Operations. So, and they also say that this paper is available, but I don't know. But anyway, so let's take a look at the 1980 warfare paper. So, yeah, let's take a look at the paper now. And I have this posted. Let me just verify that. I'm real sure I have that. Yeah, I have that posted down below, so you'll find that easily down below. This is titled From Psyops to Mind War, The Psychology of Victory. Lieutenant John Alexander's Military Review article in support of psychotronics, intelligence and operational employment of ESP was decidedly provocative. Criticism of research in this area based on an existing frontiers of scientific law brings to mind the laughter that greeted the Italian scientist Pasolini in 1794 when he suggested that bats navigate in the dark means that we all now call sonar. If they see with their ears, then do they hear with their eyes, went the joke. But I suspect that the U.S. Navy is glad someone took the idea seriously enough to pursue it. Psychotronic research is in its infancy, but the U.S. Army already possesses an operational weapon system designed to do what Lieutenant Colonel Alexander would like ESP to do, except that this weapon system uses existing communications media. It seeks to map the minds of neural and enemy individuals and then to change them in accordance with U.S. national interests. It does this on a wide scale, embracing military units, regions, nations, and blocks. It is also the present form. It is called psychological operations or PSYOP. Does PSYOP work, or is it merely a cosmetic with which field commanders would rather not be bothered? I'm going to put this on hold and I will pick it up in a bit. I think I'll be looking at about 3 segments here. It's going to be a long show, but I'm trying to unpack what I know to date because then I have to get off to the more other things that I have going on, right? So first we need to understand this part. So let me put this on hold and get a break myself so I can clearly explain it and not be feeling like I'm being rushed through it. So let me get here. Okay, what I'm going to be doing in this segment, this will be my last segment. I have things organized so I usually pick it up again. But today I'm going to be finishing with this Mind War business. And then next, I will be talking about more of this Aquino business and how exactly they set together this group to corral the children with all this mind control stuff. But today's not the day. So what I'll be doing is at the end of this, I'll be signing off and then come back tomorrow with the how it all got started, because how it all got started is critical for us to know, and I don't want to be rushing through it. So where was I on this mind war business? Okay. So anyway, so there's a lot to read through here. I'm basically skimming through this piece, but it's there for everybody to read for themselves. It is impossible for me to sit here online and read and read and read. So consider this your study course, right? If you want to learn more, well, then you'll click on those links. If you don't want to learn more, well, that's fine too. Don't click on the links. Simple as that. But no, I'm not going to be in a position. In the past, I would have dug into this and done it in multiple series, but not going to happen. We have to keep moving according to what our abilities are, right? So this is where it gets interesting. It is deliberate in that it is planned, systematic, and comprehensive effort involving all levels of activity from strategic to tactical. So it said, compare this definition with what that of the psychological warfare as first offered by General William Donovan. Remember Wild Bill Donovan, the creator of the OSS? And that was his World War II basic estimate of psychological warfare. And this is what Wild Bill Donovan, and remember Wild Bill Donovan went on to start that huge legal company and legal team in New York. But anyway, so here's what he said. Psychological warfare is the coordination and use of all means, including moral and physical, by which the end is attained, other than those of recognized military operations, but including the psychological exploitation of the result of those recognized military actions, which tend to destroy the will of the enemy to achieve victory and to damage his political or economic capacity to do so, which tend to deprive the enemy of the support, assistance, or sympathy of his allies or associates or of neutrals, or to prevent his acquisition of such support, assistance, or sympathy, or which tend to create, maintain, or increase the will to victory of our own people and allies, and to acquire, maintain, or to increase the support, assistance, and sympathy of neutrals. So it's all rigged to get the person that's doing the reporting to be crazy and to make the other people think that it's okay. They're sympathetic, right? If the euphemism psychological operations resulted from, as one general officer put it in a 1917 letter, a great need for a sentiment which would be used in peacetime that would not shock the sensibilities of the citizens of democracy. So he's saying in 1917 that which would be used in peacetime and would not shock the sensibilities of citizens, then it may have succeeded domestically. On the other hand, it does not seem to have reassured the sensibilities of the Soviets, who in 1980 described the U.S. Army Psyops as including unpardonable methods of ideological sabotage, including not just blackmail, provocation, and terror. So remember, I'm just scanning through this, okay? It's going to be up to you to dig in for the final details. According to the present doctrine, Psyops is considered an accessory to the main effort of winning battles and wars. The term usually used in force multiplier. It is certainly not considered a precondition to command decisions. The Psyops cannot predetermine the political or psychological effectiveness of a given military action. It can only be used to point that action in the best possible colors as it is taken. Mind war cannot be so relegated. It is, in fact, the strategy of which tactical warfare must conform if it is to achieve maximum effectiveness. The mind war scenario must be preeminent in the mind of the commander and must be the principal factor in his every field decision. Otherwise, he sacrifices measures which actually contribute to winning. So, according to Psyops, combat support units, as we now know them, must become a thing of the past. Mind war teams must offer technical expertise in the command from the onset of the planning process. So they need to bring in these Psyops people early on, right? Mind war must target all participants if it is to be effective. It must not only weaken the enemy, it must strengthen the United States. It strengthens the United States by denying enemy propaganda access to our people and by explaining and emphasizing to our people the rationale for our national interests in a specific war. Understanding existing United States law, Psyops units may not target American citizens. Well, this is what they're saying, right? They will break any law that they came up with to murder one of us, right? Do you think it's legal that they're murdering me in my home? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. And if this weren't such a COVID-controlled area of the country, then I would propose suing these people who have all these transformers around my house, like the electricity company, and scaring the crap out of them. Will I? Hey, time will tell, right? Time will tell. Somebody needs to sue these people for putting transformers around my house. I've given you all the information. Go look at my page called Smart Meters. I have a photo of all of these smart meters which are now surrounding my home. If anybody wants to help me out, let's gun after these people, right? File a lawsuit, make them squirm, make them wonder what's going on. Hey, I haven't been shy. I've given out my home address. They never thought I would do that because they thought that no one would believe me. Well, I upped them one regard, right? I published, have told you all my home address, and I will repeat it again. I live at 309 East Klug, Klug Avenue, Norfolk, Nebraska, zip code 68701. Go onto Google Maps, type that into Google Maps. It'll take you directly in front of my house. I'm directly across from the elementary school. There. You could also look at that map, which I have provided in that file, that shows where these transformers were put all around my house. They literally are the gang that can't shoot straight around here. I knew they did the thing on my smart meter. I knew they put the transformers around my house because I saw them in action. So, yeah, so go look at my stuff there. I removed myself from driving a few years ago. No way could they run me off the road, right? So in removing those things, they obviously got into some sort of panic and thought, well, let's surround her house with electricity. Maybe that'll stop her. Ha! Gotcha, suckers. Hasn't stopped me. You guys think you're so smart, but you really need to lay off of some of those drugs, would be my recommendation. And also, all of this anger toward women. Let me talk about that for a second here. Most of these people do not know who their mother is. That is on purpose. Why do you think they raped all those women in Germany? Because if you are raised without your mother, a different kind of dynamic takes place. And I'm not saying it all turns out to be bad. But if you are raised without your mother in your life, or if your mother is in your life and she's a crazy person doing stuff to you, that also diminishes your ability to be psychologically that alert. Taking the mother out of the picture and the dad weakens the protection for the children. That's why they wanted mom to be out working, so that they could get their hands on the children by sending us to daycare centers and all this stuff. That was the plan all along. So yeah, they're the people who can't shoot straight. So hey, if anybody wants to help me sue them, let's go after them, right? If anybody wants to stop their trafficking, remember, take away the money. Part of their satanic thing is to get the most money that they can, because to them, the person that rapes and sodomizes the most children are the ones who, in their view, is going to win. Unlike Psyops, MindWar had nothing to do with the deception or even the selected and therefore misleading truth. Rather, it states a whole truth that, if it does not now exist, will be forced into existence by the will of the United States. So they are saying, if it does not now exist, this psyops is saying this whole truth will be forced into existence. So a mind war message does not have to fit conditions of extract credibility to do so. They say the psyops theme, its source makes it credible. And they said, this person, Levi, once said, the terror of the Roman name will be such that the world shall know that once a Roman army has laid siege to a city, nothing will move it, nor the vigors or winter, nor the weariness of months and years, that it knows no end but victory, and is ready in a swift and sudden stroke. It will not serve to preserve until that victory is achieved. So, to put it mildly, they believe that all of this is going to work against the rest of us. Is it working? Yeah, of course it is, because people are fractured, right? There is an ability, and this is pretty low level work, right? It would be pretty easy to get demons opened up around children. So yes, I believe completely that in the 80s, they took this MK Ultra thing and spread it out to all of these care facilities, care centers, daycare centers, and all that. And then with all of their therapists and stuff, all of those kids got called liars. And I will be back with how they cooked up that process, because that was pretty interesting. They actually came up with a way to make all these kids liars. But unfortunately, today is not the day for that. I will be back. I'm going to be playing a song that kind of speaks to how I'm feeling right now. The goal is, in the next show, I will be able to clearly go through what I have left. So I do have these show notes over there. I do have this file. I have the stuff about the Montauk Project. I have the stuff about Aquino and all the stuff with the Presidio. I have links to describing what the Satanic Panic all meant. And amazingly, I watched all those Satanic Panic shows at the time. The people who were getting busted and stuff. And I also have a couple more links you might want to look at. I have I have the words 13 Baron of Clan of Campbell there. So if you want to copy and paste that and do more research, you'll have the right words to use. And I also have the clip from the Jimmy Dore show, the guy that's got his left eye bashed out. He just did it gives you an example of how misdirection works. He's sitting there smiling and stuff. He brought on this guy who's talking about that Israel was it. Well, it was the United States, right? We're clear about that. But this is how disinformation. So if you get a chance, watch that clip. It's interesting how they position these things. And don't forget to look while Jimmy Dore is sitting there. Remember, Jimmy Dore is the son of an Irish cop family out of Chicago, okay? So notice his face. He's got over 1 million subs now. He just had Alex Jones on. I think there's some ritual with these YouTube people. When they get to a certain level, then they start getting the treatment itself. Because why does Jimmy Dore have a wonky left eye? Why does Glenn Greenwald all of a sudden have a wonky left eye? Bernie Sanders can barely keep his left eye open. Is all of this the rantings of a crazy person? Do I sound crazy to you? Of course not. I was set up so everybody would think that I was crazy, right? And maybe one day I will tell you the whole story because when it first happened to me, they also drugged my mother into it. My mother, bless her heart, almost had a breakdown because of what this therapist did by claiming that I was crazy and that I would have to be on medication for the rest of my life. Keep in mind, therapists are not allowed to prescribe medicine. So during this meeting with me and my mother to try to help me, he convinced my mother that I was crazy. I would always be crazy, and without pills, I would never survive. My mother died thinking that I was insane. That was why she made sure that I had a house, because she was convinced, because they convinced everybody that I was crazy. And that is exactly how it works. And if you ever have thought calling me crazy was a joke, I may have laughed because you made me so fucking uncomfortable calling me out for being crazy. These people define what is normal. So to them, crazy people don't rape or abuse children or sodomize them. Crazy people don't do any of this stuff. So what they're saying is normal people do this kind of fucking terror to children and the rest of us. No, I'm sorry. I never thought they were serious. I finally woke up and decided, who are these fuckers calling me crazy? Well, I have taken a lot of looks. They, in fact, are evil demons, okay? They want to destroy the rest of us. So just consider that. This is not a cult. But every time you give them your eyes, every time you give them your money, you are feeding into exactly how they want us to perform. So when you call me crazy, they think it's pretty funny, right? Well, these people were all missing a mother who would do what my mother did for me, right? These people do not even know who their own mother is. Why do you think they act like such idiots online? Why do you think they attack each other and act so childlessly? Because without a mother in your life, you're more susceptible to drugs and things. You're more susceptible to confusion. Children have said, children that were adopted and didn't know they were adopted, they knew their entire lives that something was not right by missing their mother. And many of them have said, stop with all of this. No one should be raised without their own mother. It is a very serious bond that they have figured out how to break. So keep in mind, if you're thinking through your mind and thinking, well, hey, my mom did some of this stuff to me, keep in mind kindness above assaulting others. Understand the circumstances of what it might have happened. But if you find, in fact, that the person that you thought was your mother what turns out to be a monster, well, call it out or learn to deal with it, because we're in the end chapter. We're just trying to figure out how we got here. And separating us from our mothers was a huge, huge part of it. I think all the raping and stuff that went on with Germany kind of proves my point, right? Disassociate the child from its one main structure, the mother figure, right? Because they hate women because their mother did not stick up for them. Their mother was just a vehicle to give them to these evil people to raise as their own child. So this is where a lot of this pain and trauma originates from, is from the base of our mothers. So don't forget that part. Don't forget how important that part is in all of this. And that's why I'm sure they were doing all that raping and stuff of mothers. And then in these daycare centers, those kids would not have been in daycare centers had they not had the mothers. The mothers got convinced that in order to be upwardly mobile, everybody had to work, right? Well, that took the hands off of the children. Exactly how it works. So they wanted to destroy our mothers because they don't have a mother that they know of, right? Or their mother was one of these crazy psychopaths who took their kid at 3 years old to have them sodomized in some ritual, right? So that certainly would bring about a lot of hatred toward women if your mom was involved in that. And I believe 100% everybody you see on the screen is on the team, right? They have all been sodomized as children. They have been created to be budding young psychopaths. As simple as that. They want to confuse it and all of these things, and the direct energy with all this other crazy stuff, but let's stick with reality. So anyway, so I'm pretty exhausted. I will be back, and I need to be rested for the next part because that part uncovers exactly how they manipulated the rest of us to pull all of this off. So anyhow, be safe out there, and goodbye.